is wondering who gets the $134 billion. President Trump is not pleased, to say the least, after suffering his biggest defeat yet at the Supreme Court. A 6-3 majority, including 2 conservative justices appointed by President Trump, ruled Friday that he violated the law by unilaterally implementing sweeping tariffs on foreign goods without congressional approval. Even after his rebuke by the justices, he attacked as, quote, fools and lapdogs disloyal to our Constitution, Trump is forging ahead with tariffs. New ones, announcing a 10% levy on all foreign goods, which he bumped up to 15% yesterday, with a vow that more will follow. I'm going to get straight to the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Thank you so much for being here this morning, sir. I do want to start with the big question. Will you refund the roughly $134 billion in revenue taken by these emergency tariffs?
Well, Dana, that's not the big question. Let's just level set here. What the Supreme Court did was a very narrow reading of the president's authority under the IEEPA tariffs. We have other tariff authorities which have been functioning, Section 232 tariffs, Section 301 tariffs, and Dana, when you say it's a big question, that's bad framing because the Supreme Court didn't even address that. The Supreme Court remanded it down to a lower court, and we will follow what they say, but that could be weeks or months when we hear them. So the Supreme Court did not address refunds.
Sure, they didn't address refunds. That is clearly going to be up to you, which is why.
No, Dana. It is not up to me. It is
not you.
It is not up to the administration. It is up to the lower court. Let's just be clear on that.
Okay. Well, the Justice Department told a federal appeals court in this very case last year, if tariffs imposed on plaintiffs during these appeals are ultimately held unlawful, then the government will issue refunds to plaintiffs.
Again, I'm not going to get out ahead of the court. We will follow the court's direction, but as I said, that could be weeks or months away. That decision was not rendered on Friday.
What do you think? You're the Treasury Secretary. What do you think should happen? In the past, you have said it is possible.
Again, I want to point to what we're doing. The president, the administration remains undeterred in reshoring American factories and getting rid of these massive trade imbalances. That's the big story here, is that we are immediately going to go to Section 122 tariffs, and that the revenue for the U.S. Treasury for 2026, the projections are unchanged.
Okay, I'm going to ask about the new tariffs that the president talked about over the weekend, but before we move off of this, I know in the past, before the Supreme Court went with its ruling, you said any tariff refund would be corporate welfare and would likely not get passed on to the American consumers. What about the countless small business owners in America, many of whom have spoken with CNN, who say they're bearing the cost and have been bearing the cost of tariffs?
Again, I'm not going to get out ahead of the court. We don't know what arrangements were made. We don't know what foreign suppliers, whether they discounted what's happened. So let's just focus on the news on Friday, and then I'll come back after the lower court rules.
Yeah, as the Treasury Secretary, it's hard to believe that you don't have an opinion or know where these revenues, over $100 billion are going to go, or have an opinion on where they should go.
I had an opinion, and the court did not agree with my opinion. So, Dana, I'm going to wait for the lower court opinion.
Okay, so let's talk about what is happening right now, which is the president did sign an executive order Friday night calling for that 10% global tariff, and then he raised it to 15% on Saturday. As you mentioned, he's invoking Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 to justify these new tariffs. That's a section of the federal law that no president has ever invoked. What does the president think will happen in the court, or why does he think it will stand up to legal scrutiny?
This 122 authority is good for 150 days. During that time, we will do study on Section 232, which will be done by Commerce Department, Section 301, which will be done by USTR, Those tariffs remain in effect and have withstood more than 4,000 challenges since the president's first term. So during that time, it is very likely that those studies will result in higher 232s, higher 301s, and it will get us back to the same tariff level. We've been in touch with our foreign trading partners, and all of them want to keep the trade deals that have been set. Dana, we've had great economic results over the past year. 4.1% second quarter GDP, 4.3, 4.4 in the third quarter, and it would have been a very strong fourth quarter if the Democrats hadn't shut down the government to hurt the American people.
On that note about the new tariffs that he put in place, you're right that it is 150 days, and then Congress has to make it permanent, or has to approve it, I should say. How do you have the votes, or how do you see those votes coming to fruition, especially with a Congress that doesn't entirely support the tariffs, at least not enough with this narrow majority?
Again, Dana, I think you missed what I just said, is that the 122, we'll see what Congress does, but the 122 is likely a 5-month bridge during which studies on Section 232 tariffs and Section 301s are done, and I think it's highly likely that those tariffs will rise up, and that the 122s could disappear after 5 months. So, that this is more of a bridge than a permanent facility.
Okay. I just want to kind of take a step back on this and really look at what one of the justices who voted against the president's authority here, Neil Gorsuch, who of course the president nominated, he wrote in a concurring opinion, quote, "Americans fought the revolution in no small part because they believed that only their elected representatives, not the king, not even parliament, possessed authority to tax them. The framers gave Congress alone access to the pockets of the people." So you're talking about different sections of the law, but what the Supreme Court said is that it is not the executive's function to do these tariffs. It needs to go through Congress, and that is what the Constitution says.
Again, Dana, that's not correct. That what the Supreme Court said is that the president cannot use the IEPA, the
Right.
Emergency Economic Powers Act, to do this. The president does have other authorities, and as I said, the Section 232 tariffs and the Section 301 tariffs have withstood more than 4,000 lawsuits. So it was very narrow, and it's very interesting that the Supreme Court said that the president can't raise $1 of revenue with tariffs, but he can't put on a full embargo. So they reaffirmed his ability to block all trade. He just cannot accept $1 for the trade. And I will tell you, like the tariff revenues, they have come into the Treasury. But more importantly, the ultimate goal of tariffs is rebalancing trade and bringing our trade deficits into balance. We've seen the goods sector, the deficit with our trading partners drop by 17%. We've seen our bilateral deficit with China drop substantially, and we are seeing trillions of investments and factories coming back to the U.S. because of the tariffs.
I take your point that the Supreme Court ruling was narrow on what's called IEPA, but these concurrent opinions were written it looked like, to send a message about the balance of power and the limits on executive authority when it comes to tariffs and taxing. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Coming up, he's a thorn in Donald Trump's side and a 2028 frontrunner, but what do we really know about Gavin Newsom? I sat down with him for a wide-ranging interview on his new memoir. That's next. And later,